And how do they do that? They say, oh, we're going to save money. How do we do that? We fire the most expensive people. And then they turn around right afterwards and they realize, oh, somebody still needs to do that work. Otherwise, our business is going to suffer.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Campfire. It's your host, Desmond Dixon, and I'm here with my other co-hosts, Heather Stafford and Josh Jacko. And I am here with our special guest today. He's the myth, the legend himself. He is the host of the podcast, Smashing the Plateau, and he's also a full-time entrepreneur and consultant. His name is David Shriner-Cahn. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Desmond. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this because when I first met you, we had a lot of similarities between being engineers, but then also transitioning into the consulting world. And so the first thing I want to kind of unpack here today before we get into some game and some strategy is, how did you go from being a chemical engineer to actually be a consultant? Like, what's the story behind that?
Well, there was few steps in between that lasted 23 years, but the trigger was I got fired.
Oh, that's the fast way, right?
It still took me 23 years to become a consultant after being fired as an engineer.
Oh, wow. Okay. So talk to me about the 23 years, right? Did you work for another corporate, company and business development? Like, talk to us a little about that, about your background a little bit.
I went from being an engineer to working in the nonprofit sector. So I was a nonprofit executive for 23 years. And I had, I'd actually thought about, I thought about entrepreneurship when I left engineering, but didn't really know any entrepreneurs, didn't know much about running a business, and couldn't really pull it off. The thing was, I was doing pretty well as an engineer. It was a good job. I was well paid. As a matter of fact, a month before I was let go, I got a great performance review and a big raise. But the company that I worked for lost a lot of business, and so they had to fire a huge portion of the staff. So that was the reason why I got pushed out. And at that point, I looked ahead at my future, and I saw guys that were probably 25, 30 years older than me that had been in corporate life for their whole career as engineers. And some of them were getting pushed out at age 50, 55, 58. And in those days, there were retirement plans that the companies would sponsor. There weren't any 401ks or IRAs. This predates all that. And so the companies would save a lot of money by firing people that were not quite fully vested in their retirement plans, because not only would they save on these high salaries, but they would save on the payout during the retirement. That was part of the strategy of the restructuring. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm up for this game, where what is looked at is really the bottom line. It's not about looking at humans. That's why I went into the nonprofit sector, where I would say most people in the sector focus on what good can we do in the world? How do we serve our clients? And how do we also take care of our employees? So the mission of the organizations was quite different, and people's behavior was quite different. I think a lot has shifted in the world of business in general. And, you have a lot of companies today where they realize that their employees are their most precious resource, and they do the right things with employees. And frankly, since I started consulting in 2006, I've had a lot of small business clients where small business owners often treat their employees like family. They really care about their employees, and nothing causes a small business owner more stressed than not being able to meet payroll. when they know that their employees are really dependent on the paycheck. That's a very different mythos than some of what I saw in kind of big corporate life. And we're going back like 40 years ago. So, so I realized early on that I wanted to be in an environment where people cared about one another. And whether I wanted to do that as an employer or an entrepreneur, the environment was really important. So I focused on being in the right environment. And then that whole time that I was in the nonprofit sector, I still thought about having more control over my career than I would, even as a nonprofit executive. And when you're in executive roles, you have a lot of authority. It's not like it's not the same as being a junior engineer, where you're totally, a cog in somebody else's wheel. So, so I did have a lot of control over what I did, yet I still, and this is probably, I think, what separates entrepreneurs from employees. Entrepreneurs, I think most of us are control freaks. We like being in charge. It's not that we're averse to structure, but we want to be the ones to create the structure as opposed to having to fit into somebody else's structure. So, I have a friend who's a longtime entrepreneur, has had a solo consulting business almost his entire career, also studied engineering like me and like you. But he says, I learned early on I don't play well with others. That's why I started my own business. But, reality is entrepreneurs, we do play well with others. It's just like we want to have our own structure the way we have it. And that's kind of why we do our own thing. And particularly like independent consultants that work on their own, it's really all about crafting a business that's going to meet your needs for your lifestyle and your personality, your behavior, your mission, your values. And when you're an entrepreneur, you can do that. Now, the challenge is, unless you're independently wealthy, you still have bills to pay. So your business has to make money. As you got to figure out how to, that piece of it, which is how to make money, is often challenging for those of us that were trained in a particular discipline, where our focus in our education and our earlier on in our career is really about solving problems for particular kinds of clients, as opposed to bringing business in, running business, growing business. That's a whole different skill set. So, kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's a really perfect answer. I laugh because a lot of it sounds very familiar. Very, very familiar. Why sales? It's strange and funny. Like, I happen to have a couple of engineers that have shifted out of engineering and into a more creative career that work for me. And I've noticed the ones and zeros mind really, it either jives really well with the idea of creating something new, as long as it's within the constructs, or it doesn't jive well at all with that's not how things are done. But what made you pick sales of all things that you could really dive into later in life?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I would say that I'm an expert in sales, but if you're in your own business, probably the most important component is sales, because if there are no sales, there's no business. Then you just have a hobby. So as a business owner, you do need to know how to sell. And by the way, selling doesn't mean like there's this image of like the used car salesman, really like hard sell. You don't have to, like, I'm the furthest from being a hard salesman. I believe that if you have something to offer that solves a particular problem for some defined audience, if they need what you have and they want it, they will buy it. So I don't think you actually have to be a hard sell kind of person at all. As a matter of fact, in today's world, especially with all the online stuff, and we're all barraged with people that are trying to sell stuff all the time, the better you can be at helping people solve their problems, and that's your approach in selling, you'll do a lot better.
Okay, I like it. So, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit about you personally. Like, what do you do for fun? Like, what really like gets you? I mean, for what it's worth, I have a philosophy that your passion is not passion does not always equal profit. It's not necessarily the thing I'm most passionate about is not what I make money doing. I'm exceptionally passionate about what I do coach and what I do consult on, but I have a thing for for rehabbing old furniture. And it's part of what makes me a little weird and quirky. It's like, tell me about who you are. Because you're an interesting human being. You're very, very precise.
Interesting. Don't know that I necessarily thought about myself as being precise. A little bit about me. Well, I'm curious. I like asking questions. I like meeting new people. I like the fact that you can meet a lot of new people very easily nowadays from all over the world without having to schlep around. That's actually pretty cool. The only challenge is the time zone challenge. It's not about it. It costs very little to be able to connect with people from all over the world. You need to have a common language. It's really hard to do it if you don't speak the same language. So I like podcasting because of that. It's really easy for me to connect with people. I like attending online events. I think some of them are quite interesting. It's interesting to see how people put these things together.
Right. Oh, from the tech all the way up to how they deliver. Like, there is not an industry standard for it anymore. Everybody does it different. It's super curious. Like, you see some people are putting together like, okay, like, you do have to be on video. You don't have to be on video. I want you to pay attention. Don't care at all about the customer experience. And yet they still work. Do you miss live events?
Yes. And I live in New York City, which is pretty densely populated place. I like arts and culture. We go to the Philharmonic, and go to theater, go to museums. And sadly, that's been just about completely absent for the last 2 years. We've started doing a little bit of it the last few months, but it's things were starting to ease up a little bit, and then they didn't. So
I know, right? Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go back to my little hidey hole.
Yeah,
just kidding.
The social isolation is pretty hard.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Imagine what this pandemic would be like without the technology we have. If this were 10 years ago, the whole world would have reacted totally differently.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't even want to hazard a guess on some of the things that would have ended up happening because they would not have been good. But without the technology, I mean, I would aim to make a strong guess that quite a bit of the economic structure in the world would have collapsed. It just would have.
Yeah, or people would have, gone on behaving and interacting the way they did before, and there probably would have been a lot more people sick and dying.
Welcome to the Black Plague.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, I just forgot. Like, there's two things that you said that were like super interesting before we went here, because we talk about it. This is probably like the third time this has been brought up in a different frame in terms of like entrepreneurs always want to, have their control of like their structures and their time. And I know one thing that always comes up that, I get my hand slapped on or have to really like get present on is just because we have more time and more structure doesn't mean that we're not even more busy than when we were W-2s or actually employees. Like, I feel like I work way more now, even though I cannot if I don't want to, but I'm so like want to like take things to the next level or drive results that I tend to like just love to, put the hours in. So, like since you've been obviously you had a very different career path in terms of engineering, nonprofit to being an entrepreneur. Like talk to me about like your relationship with time, right? Like, how do you like manage, your relationship with time? I think that'd be a very interesting.
Yeah. So one of the, you're totally right, Desmond. So, entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs that are successful, tend to be very structured with their time. Because you can always make more money. You can't make more time. There's only 24 hours in a day. I don't care where you live in the world. There's always 24 hours in a day. There are always 168 hours in a week. Now, one could argue that if you're working a 40-hour a week, there are about 2,000 working hours in a year. There are many people that work way more than 2,000 hours, but you still can't work more than 24 hours in a day. So what do you do with those 24 hours? And how do you make them as effective as possible? And that really does come down to structure and process. So for me, I like to have a daily plan. I do best when I know the plan is set the day before. Because the reality is that there's certain elements of the plan that are likely to go forward without too much disruption. So for example, we have scheduled time together to record this episode. We all showed up at the time time you said you wanted to do it. And we're all focused on doing this episode while we're together, for this, the number of minutes that we're here. Other than those scheduled meeting times, a lot of other stuff is in play. And particularly when it comes to work that I know I need to do on my own, there could be a lot of fluidity to that. And then there are the unexpected things, like a client has a crisis and really needs my attention. Okay, so I might have planned that I am going to write something that I want to share on LinkedIn, or maybe I wanted to make some introductions to people inside our membership community to try to boost engagement. So what do I do first? Do I take care of the client that has the emergency? Or do I make the introduction to people that are inside the community to foster their engagement? These kinds of decisions are going on all day long. And I have some days when the non-scheduled meeting time ends up getting tossed totally out the window. And whatever was on the list at the beginning of the day is still there at the end of the day. And then there are other days when I'm just knocking stuff out and I'm really getting done what I think is important.
Yeah, I think we have some same mental modeling with that of like, I usually try to prepare on the Sunday or the Saturday for the next week and do briefings and be very intentional with what the goals are and everything like that. So, all right, I love it. So we're going to go to my favorite part of the podcast today, which is like, we're going to talk about sales, right? Heather is a sales ninja. I do it for a living. You obviously teach with your, the people that's in your group and the people that you serve, that sales is obviously super important, because you mentioned if you're not selling, then you just simply have a hobby, right? And Josh, you could definitely jump into some of your questions, because Josh has been getting support in terms of selling. And so like when you're talking, let's say, just play a scenario out. So like when someone who has been in a career for, let's say, 15 years, and, they held some executive roles and they're wanting to transition out to probably have more structure of their time, right? Because we live in the great resignation. What's the, what are some of your strategies or tactics or, your ideology around like getting your first couple sales, right? Like, how do you usually foster that environment? And Heather, you can feel free to hop into, but how do you like, what's some of your ideology around like getting that first one? Because the first one is usually the hardest one, right? Like what's the, what's your ideology around that?
If you're leaving a job and you are starting a consulting business, first of all, as a consultant, the vast majority of your sales are going to be based on relationships, but based on who knows you. If not close to 100% of your sales will come from relationships. So when you think about it, when you're leaving a job, your best relationships are probably with your last employer. And I can tell you, I have had this conversation with many podcast guests, particularly on Going Solo, about consultants that have started their business after they were terminated from their job and their first consulting client was their previous employer. Because there are all kinds of reasons why a job might get terminated. If you look at the statistics, if you're over the age of 50 and you live in the US, you have more than a 50% likelihood that you are going to experience unexpected job termination at some point in your future. So it is actually quite likely. However, particularly for these more senior employees, the termination is quite frequently not because of performance. It could be there's a change in the marketplace, like business is bad, or there's an acquisition, right? There's a buyout, and the acquiring company only wants to keep some of the employees, and you just may be out of luck that your job is gone. Sometimes you get a new boss, and very often the new boss wants to prove himself or herself. And how do they do that? They say, "Oh, we're going to save money. How do we do that? We fire the most expensive people." And then they turn around right afterwards and they realize, "Oh, somebody still needs to do that work. Otherwise, our business is going to suffer." So one of the ways that you can actually get your first client is by talking to your previous employer. And then beyond your previous employer, other relationships. So the most important thing to do is to mine those relationships and make sure that you have one-on-one conversations with as many of those relationships as you can, as quickly as you can, and then start to develop new relationships as well.
Well said. Well said. It's fun. I don't know. I have a funny history because I started my first company by accident. Well, I was in college. I literally kind of like stumbled face first into sandpaper and went, "Oh, this is a company. This is happening." And I won't say that I wasn't sure about being an entrepreneur because I knew I couldn't work for somebody else. I had done it. It didn't work out very well. I didn't love it. But when I was in grad school, it was like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll put something together at some point. And it was never that. It was like, I'm not ready to take that jump yet. And for a lot of people don't realize that, especially when it comes to the things that they're best at, it's really simple as look around at what you do with your time constantly. Like if you are constantly the person that is helping support relationships and you really love doing that and you're solving people's relationship problems, your ideal clients are right in front of you most of the time.
Yeah. But what was the business that you started when you were in college?
A branding and design firm. So I got my master's in, I have an MFA in graphic design, brand development and small business brand strategy. And then I went on right after I got done with my master's to become a full stack developer. Mostly because I'm a control freak and I could design it and then somebody wouldn't do what I told them to do and it would drive me crazy. So I was like, okay, I can, like, this just can't be that hard. And programming wasn't. It happened to be enough. You are obnoxious. It just happened to be the thing that tech came relatively natural to me. It was never my strong suit. Like business wasn't necessarily my strong suit. I had this really like honed in talent from a very young age to be able to zoom out and solve the problem, not one way, not two way, but 3 or 4 or 5 ways. Going, oh, you could do this or this or this, and that'll also work. And you could probably use a coat hanger, an upside down water bottle, and somebody's rain jacket to make that work. Like, it just made sense to me. So technology and how it connects everything was just a commonality. It was like, oh, A plus B plus C. And so I kind of fell into that world coming out of design school. My undergrad's in philosophy. I did a 180 when I went to grad school. I was like, oh, I'm going to go be an artist.
And then a developer.
And I ran and then a developer. And then I got into software engineering. And then I got into a handful of other things. I ended up going back to school. I have my doctorate in CSLIS. I have a computer science, library science degree for artificial intelligence and human interaction.
Right. So you have a really unique set of skills and experiences now.
Yeah. And
which is
honestly,
great.
It's such a big topic. Everybody's like, okay, either you're forced to leave a job or you're wanting to leave a job. And there is not just 1, 2, but there's like 25,000 things you have to learn if you're going to successfully run a business. Not just what the fuck am I selling or what am I doing, and how to do that part, because that's such a huge piece. But how do I run a business? Basic life skills for managing your own time, getting out of your own way, and everything else. How do I hire somebody? How do I not fail so often at hiring somebody? Or how do I do it quickly? And do I actually want to grow a corporate company? Do I want to grow a small little boutique mom and pop shop? Do I want to be a millionaire, or am I good with 250K? Like, there's so many questions. People are, I just want to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, are you sure about that? Let me tell you my experience with being an entrepreneur. Like, I burned down 3 marriages, burned through God knows how much money figuring out how to be an entrepreneur. But it was the most important thing. It always was. It was like an itch that you couldn't scratch. And some of us are just born that way. I would hazard to guess that you went into engineering because solving the math problem was interesting. You're like, oh no, I want to be able to figure this out and come to a conclusion and ... Like that itch that people scratch, they don't pay attention to it often enough.
Yeah, well said, Heather. Yeah, for me, it was, I did better in math and science in high school. It seemed like the sort of natural linear progression to study something that was in the sciences that was not humanities. But in reality, I've actually spent relatively little of my professional career on scientific issues. It's mostly been human dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not study it. I did not study it in school at all.
No, it's something you come by naturally. That's the talent. Like you've got your all-heated passion, and you have natural talent, and then you have the skill sets that you've honed and gotten very good at. You have to put all of those things in a blender along with your real life, which is sick kids and puking puppies and laundry and everything else, including the grocery store, which is my least favorite place. All in a blender and put it together. And is it going to taste good when it comes out?
Yeah, some pieces, yes, and some pieces not so much.
Right?
Oh, man.
So I've got a dying question for you, though. What is your either like best story or like your highest, like, I could just like jump for joy with a client so far in your consulting career? What's your little hero story?
I've had clients that have been in dire straits. I've had clients that have not been able to meet payroll. It wasn't clear when they were going to be able to meet payroll. I've had clients that have had the electricity turned off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've had clients that lost a lot of business. And then I've seen them turn around And the most rewarding thing is when you see somebody in a really narrow place and they have the mental fortitude to persevere and come out of it. So, I have a client that really wanted to be able to work from home, travel, and be profitable. And it just didn't seem like it was going to happen, or how it would happen. And there was debt involved, and the client is now debt free, earning probably double what they thought they were going to be earning. Has paid travel as part of what's going on in the business. It's like all the pieces are coming together, and is at the point of being able to pick and choose what kind of work to do, and being able to refer prospects out, not necessarily take everything just because the money is needed. I have another client that went from again, electricity being turned off to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. Another one where sales are like 10 times what they were several years ago. And these are all people that have good hearts. They want to do the right thing for their employees, their families, their community. There's a lot of good in small business that happens that I think is often overlooked in the media. Small business is the engine of our economy. Every Fortune 500 company started as somebody's idea, and they eventually got it to grow to where it is today. So there's way too much attention, in my opinion, in media and politics, that's paid to the largest corporations in the world. And frankly, they're the ones that I think need less help than the small businesses.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, not one bit. So, what's your next goal? Like crazy you conquering these days?
So we started a membership program for consultants this year.
Nice.
It's been in the works for a long time. This specifically for consultants that have started their business after 20 plus years as an employee. So these are high achievers who stay in the same field. They go from being an employee to being on their own. And what's most important is being with like-minded people that are working through the same challenges. You go from an environment where you are, especially if you're mid to high level in a corporation, your inbox is full. It's overflowing. You're always overwhelmed. Your calendar is always full. People always want your attention to talk to you. And then you go out on your own, and all of a sudden you have no business. Your inbox is empty. Your phone's not ringing. Nobody wants to talk to you. Your quote unquote friends from work have started to ghost you. And like, what do you do? And all that stuff just, it plays, does a number on your head. And so you may think that you're really good at something, but you've never sold it. And so, you spend, and all of a sudden you're spending a whole lot of time alone, and you may be a little unsure of yourself about, can I actually get up and sell this thing? I was a really great brand strategist. Can I actually sell my services as a brand consultant? I don't know. I've never done it. How much should I price for my services? I was used to being told what I'm qualified to get paid. And all of a sudden, I'm the one now who's stating the price. It's very different. Like when you go into a situation as an employee, there's a real big power imbalance. The employer holds all the cards. The employer tells you what you can get paid. You may think you're worth more, but you're not in a position to suddenly double your paycheck. As an entrepreneur, you are walking into a relationship with a potential client on equal footing. You're the one who's going to dictate, this is what I'm going to charge for this. The client can say yes or no, but you can state your price. You can say, I think my time, I think this project or this consulting contract is worth $10,000, $100,000, whatever it is. But it's not up to the client to dictate what the terms are. So you're on an equal footing. It's very different, but it can be really daunting. And if you're unsure about it, you may, and I've seen this happen time and again, consultants, especially early on, they will often charge too little. They think that what they're offering is not as valuable as what it is really worth. And if you're in a community with like-minded people and you start to talk about the situation that you're negotiating with a client, they'll call you on it. If they think you're charging too little, your friends in your community will say, I think you should be charging more. I know other people charge more for this stuff. And you'll go into the negotiation with a better frame of mind, so you'll negotiate stronger. And I've seen this happen over and over again. When, again, it happens when you have good peer support, you will you'll come out with a stronger result. You'll close better business. You'll get business closed faster. You'll get introduced to the kinds of people that you should be working with. You'll find people you can collaborate with. So we started a membership community, and it's something that's been in the works for a while. It's relatively new, and I can tell you so far the engagement is great. People really love it. So I would love to see this grow and be able to serve more people. As in my own small business, we've been relatively limited in the number of people that we could serve until now. So this platform allows us to be able to reach a lot more people and kind of build this out so that not only are we providing tools and resources, but members provide tools and resources for one another. So it ends up sort of, growing organically as well.
Man, I know Josh, you're about to hop in here, but dude, like, you just fired me up because like this fires me up of like how often people leave money on the table. And like, just full disclosure, I just had lunch today with someone, like randomly, like we were just eating at the same restaurant and we're like, yo, you're a four, because I'm in Latin America until I go to Europe next month. And this dude was just giving each other free game. Like, yo, I do this, he does this. He works more in a fractional executives for startup companies for 1 year contracts. And I was telling him, I was like, yo, man, like right now, Heather, she's guiding me with this, but I'm planning on spinning off a recruiting agency from my consulting agency. And traditionally I charge like $5,000 for sales guys. And this dude was like, you charge how much? And I was like, $5,000. He was like, you might be the cheapest person in the market, because he gave me some game of, I could charge 30% of their salary, or they're on track as a recruiting, like that's the industry standard. It used to be correct. 18 and 20. And I'm like, wow, great sales guys can make $100,000 to $250,000 a year. So I'm like, wow, I'm leaving $20,000 on the table. What am I doing? Right? So like when you said that, I was like, because I wasn't, but for me, I wasn't even educated, right? So like, talk to me, Josh, you can definitely hop in here, but like talk to me about like the epiphany moment, right? Of going from working for someone for 20 years, where their job is to pay you enough not to leave, but pay you. I
love that.
and so they're profitable from you, right? Like pay you enough not to leave, but not overpay you, right? So talk to me about like that psychological shift and like some common epiphanies that this transition is for like new entrepreneurs who are specifically in the high ticket space.
Yeah. So I went through this when I first started my consulting business. I had no idea how to charge for my time. And keep in mind, I used to hire consultants. So I would negotiate contracts with them. I saw lots of different kinds of contracts. And the model that I knew the most was the model of consultants charging for their time. So they would charge an hourly rate or a daily rate. That's what I had mostly seen. So I thought that's the way consultants should charge. So I early on, I had a referral for a really a good project with a great client. The project worked well and everything was fine. I charged them a daily rate because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. And right, you're laughing, and then I realized there are other pricing models you can use. And then I got clued into this. I started learning about value-based pricing, and particularly when you're selling to corporations. Like if you have 30 years of work experience, so you're really an expert at doing something, and then you're consulting to a corporation, and like I have a friend who's he's an expert at growing revenue for corporations. So he can get their gross revenue to multiply. So if you're helping a corporation grow their revenue by millions of dollars, but it only takes you 10 hours to do something, does that mean you should just charge them a few $1,000s? No, you should charge them way more, right? Way more. And you have to understand that in your own mind, you need to understand how to justify that. So the value is in what the solution provides to the client. It's not about how long it takes you. And the shorter amount of time that it takes you, the better, because the more profitable you are as a business. And if it takes you a shorter amount of time to produce something, it doesn't diminish the value for the client. It's still the same value if they're increasing their revenue by millions of dollars.
I just want to say one thing. Yes, it's more profitable, but also it's more valuable to the client. I think the faster you can get people to goals, the more it costs. Like that's my because like when you break down value, it's you could spend 2 years doing it X, or you can pay 4 times the amount of money and get it done in a quarter of the time.
Exactly. People pay for a rush job.
Yep. Oh, when I train sales guys, I'm like, when you provide a solution, and if you hear the client use the words, "Can I get it faster?" or "Can I get it sooner?" is there another option? Like that's upsell. Okay, how much faster? And then allow them to literally create their order or create their contract, and then you to present the offer with the new timetable, right? Oh man, right. This is getting good. And
you can never do these kinds of things when you're an employee.
No, no.
You clock in and you clock out.
You guys want to hear something funny? So I had a dream / nightmare over the weekend where, as you guys know, I'm traveling the world and doing all these different businesses. And the dream was like I was about to lose my job, my old employer, and the only thing I could think about was the health insurance. It wasn't the money or anything. I was like, oh, I'm gonna lose my health insurance. And then I got up and I laughed at my girl because she's this is something she used to say too, this health insurance. And it's like, man, it's crazy what we hold on to like protect ourselves from taking the leap into the unknown, right?
By the way, Desmond, when I left my job in 2006, the most common question I got from people was, David, what are you going to do for health insurance?
That's funny, man.
And I never anticipated that. I was like, I'll buy it. I just have to have enough money to buy it.
Gotta have enough money to buy it.
I'll write you a check for that. I mean, honestly, like I've said it 100 times and I'll say it 100 million more in my life. Money's not the hard part. Making money is not hard. Making money and not being miserable, that's a little harder. Enough. But making money in the right way. Making money from the right perspective is hard.
You're all about
you can always do it better.
Yeah, Heather's all about the trifecta.
Yep. You can always do it better. it's a moving target. We're human. Human beings are wired to change. So what served you, like grand example. Yes, I have been divorced 3 times solidly and walking into and out of every single one of them. The only thing that came out of my mouth was, I told you from the beginning that you would not take first place against this business. I told you, don't fight. Don't push that button. Don't fight it because you will lose. And I lost. Why does it have to be that way? Because I warned you. Like, this was not a negotiating factor. My career path and my company and my choices were always first. And, fast forward, 22 years down the line, and I have a company now that's probably half the size of my last one, because it's not what's driving all of the trains right now. I got a house. I'm in a relationship. I want a new puppy. There are things in life, like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And the measure of your life is not only your success, but what you filled it with. It's got to be a win-win every time.
I think Josh is writing the show notes today because Josh is over there
Yes,
chilling.
he is.
Can you just like jump in and like spar with this, man? I know you're soaking it all in, but
yeah, I'm over here soaking this stuff in. This is David, Heather. Thank you guys for sharing all this stuff, man. It's and you too, Des. Can't forget you too. But yeah, you got. I'm literally just taking notes like this entire time. I'm like, you know what? Let me not ask questions. Because I'm in the beginning stages of my business. I'm year 2, but it still feels like year 1. Really just tailoring things down, really hyper focusing on now who I get to serve rather than trying to serve everybody at once. Who gets the most use of your time and your value right now. And so when you were talking earlier about, how do you price your stuff? How do you, like going into brand strategy, how do you know that your value is really going to set you apart from everybody else and all that extra stuff that goes through my head. And, it's cool having a support system like, Heather and Desmond who, keep me on my toes and tell me straight up how it is, even when it comes to pricing. Like, hey man, you're charging way too little, for not only for your value, but also for the end result that you're providing for people. So hearing all this stuff is just like, man, like you guys are speaking directly to where I'm at right now in my business and working on pushing through to the next stage. One question I did have for you is when it comes to dealing with sales, when it comes to the transition that people go through, what would you say like maybe the most like 2 or 3 most common mental objections are that people have when it kind of goes into the aha moment, but more so of like before they get there, like what do you see them struggle with in the beginning process to when you see them like I'm sorry, I don't know if it was a man or woman, but these are the client of yours that had their lights their lights turned off. When they went from their lights turned off to all of a sudden, not overnight, but essentially, their business making, a couple $100,000. Like what was in the gap for them that got them from point A to, I'll say point C, point D?
Perseverance. More than anything else. Business is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And honestly, the best sales is not hunting, it's farming. Right? I always say you can, it's much easier to sell more to an existing client than to get a new client. So think about what you need to do to build solid relationships so that you can serve those relationships as long as possible. We've been in business now for 16 years. We're still providing services to our first client.
Dude, that's super impressive. Like 16 years. Man. So, this is good. All right. I have another specific question for this is, I guess, because we're all at different stages in our life and in our businesses, which is, I think this is, it's awesome being on the pod with these guys because, it's pretty diverse. So my question is about fulfillment, right? And so you don't have to give all your gems unless you want to give out as much game as you want to the audience. I'm all about giving out game, but so like when you're dealing with like fulfillment, like how do you continue to over deliver and manage expectations? Like what's the little tactic or hack that we can use or walk away with to like play the balancing game? I'll share what I do, but I'm curious to hear what you do to like manage expectations and still like over deliver so that you keep that client happy and keep the cash flow coming in.
Keep in mind that most things that we do take us longer than we think they will. A lot of things we do cost more than we think it'll cost. So in whatever you're thinking about communicating to a client about what you are promising to deliver, you're much better off overestimating the amount of time it will take, overestimating how much it's going to cost, so that your chances of getting done sooner than you tell them are high, and your chances of delivering something that will end up costing less are also pretty high. So that's a big one.
Okay, this is good stuff, and I do something similar. So when you do your contracts, or I guess is the most important thing. So like when you're working with, your clients or other people in the consulting agency, like how many of them actually take it from being a solo? Like what's the percentage based upon, you being in the game for so long? Like what's the percentage of them going from like a solo to like an actual organization where they're contracting out or prospecting out work to people? Like what's the usual percentage transition you think?
Oh yeah, I would say for our clients, it's most common for them to stay solo because they want to stay solo. I'm thinking about, I have one example of a client. They went from being a longtime employee to being a solo consultant, and then ended up buying a business with a partner. Same field. So it wasn't like they were changing industries, but ended up then basically going from being a solo to running an agency with a handful of people. And then there were a couple of mergers so that the company grew substantially. So this person went from being a single person, like independent consultant, to running a sizable agency. And I would say, that scenario, it can certainly be done if that's what you want. I would say most of the clients we work with end up staying solo because they want to be solo. They're not looking to create an agency. I have this conversation quite frequently with people about, well, how do I build my business, or how do you think people should scale their businesses? And they're like, what does scaling mean to you? What does success mean to you? It's different for each person. So, many people don't want to manage a whole team. They like having something small where they're doing most of the work, and maybe there's a little bit of time spent marketing and selling and administration, but mostly they're doing the work, and that's fine, and it supports their lifestyle, and they don't really want anything different. Some people try to grow their financial base by offering their expertise in different models. So they may do things like they may run events periodically, because events could be, they're short duration. They take a lot of energy to kind of plan and run, but they can be, if you do it right, they could be really profitable. So they can also make it easier to do other things the rest of the year. Some people like to mix paid speaking with consulting, and the paid speaking again, if you do paid speaking well and you have the right audience, you can actually be really profitable with paid speaking. And if you're doing the same talk over and over again with different audiences, the more you do it, the less work it takes you to actually produce that speech. So there are different models that you can use without having a huge team. And again, in the case of our clients, they mostly tend to want to stay solo.
I've noticed that too, honestly, if they're coming from the corporate world, if they've had any longevity in a career path, it's one of the millennial entrepreneur who wants to be a millionaire. No. Who wants to have the biggest company ever? Not me. Like, I went through that. I found out the hard way that I am probably the world's worst CEO. Like, oh God, terrible. I do not want to manage a team. Like, we came up over the 50 employee mark and I was like, I'm going to kill myself. This is what I tried to get out of.
Yeah, it's a very different kind of business than running a solo business. And honestly, it's like when you're in a company and you take your best sales producer and you make that person the sales manager, all of a sudden they fail, because managing a bunch of salespeople is a totally different skill than selling, right? So you make somebody a sales manager just because they were a top producer. That's not necessarily a formula for success. Maybe that person doesn't even want to be a sales manager. Just because you pay the sales manager more than you pay the top salesperson, maybe that's not the best path. And same thing for entrepreneurs. If you go from being, essentially a solo business, maybe you have a very small fractional team to handle certain parts of your business, like the administration and other things. If you do that to where all of a sudden you have subcontractors or employees who are delivering the same services, over time, you go from being a producer to being a manager. It's a very different skill set. And you may not be good at it. You may not want to do it. And you may not need it to support your lifestyle. So why bother?
This is so funny how this topic came up, because when I first met Heather, the first question I asked her was, how can I scale? she's
my response was
essentially like, you're not ready.
No. Pump the brakes. That's so not what I said. It's not fair. It wasn't you're not ready. It's you don't know where you're going. How do I scale?
Yeah.
Why?
Where you like? Where? Yeah. I remember
what
that.
The fuck do you want to scale?
And then now I'm at the point where I can scale technically, right? Like, a very clear path, and I'm like freaking scared because I'm like, wow, I might give myself a job, like a deeper, like, because I care so much about I care so much about like delivering the result that I could feel myself consuming with more stuff. And then like, my personal life and the whole reason why we're in this is for freedom. Right. So that was a really good point. And, we're going to build the business on the pod. So David, you'll definitely have to tune in again. And I think today was awesome. I loved your energy. We'll definitely love to have you back on, on a future episode later in the year, if you're open to it.
Sure. Happy to.
Yeah. This was fun, man.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
I really like you.
You
guys are all doing interesting and awesome things.
Yeah. I see this being a really good relationship. So, but yeah, hey guys, I hope you guys love this episode. If you found that this was super valuable, share it with some of your peeps who might need to hear some of the things that David, Heather, Josh, and myself have said today. Please give us a rating, a review, leave us a comment. If you have any specific questions you want to ask us, definitely shoot us an email. Real quick, David, where could people find you?
smashingtheplateau.com.
Boom.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and we'll leave his show notes. In the show notes, we'll leave his information. So if you guys want to reach out to him, join his community. It sounds really awesome. I might end up actually just joining, because why not be around other consultant army folks, right? Consultant army. So this was fun, guys. If you want to be a guest on our show, feel free to go to campfirecapitalism.com/guest and fill out the form. And this was fun. See you guys at the next campfire. Bye.